Hi there. I'm so happy you're here. Here's what you'll gain by listening to the very last second of this conversation with Karrie Fansler. In this episode, Karrie describes the innovative 8-phase coaching cycle she co created with a team of 36 coaches she serves and learns alongside. This cycle transforms traditional coaching cycles into dynamic partnerships that focus on maximizing student learning. You'll learn a practical step-by-step framework for coaching and discover how to make coaching more responsive to individual teachers. Stay with us. I am so excited to have you join our conversation. Let's go.
This is Solutions Coaching and Teaching Strategies, the podcast that extends education beyond the classroom. A show that offers educators and caregivers strategies to try right away and ensure every student receives the inspiration and support they need to thrive. I am Olivia Wall, and I'm so happy to welcome my guest today, Karrie Fansler. Karrie is the Learning Design Specialist in Curriculum and Instruction. Her role specifically is a generalist, and she supports coaches. Karrie and I laugh because our role is often deemed as a coach's coach. She is with Evergreen Public Schools in Vancouver, Washington, and the school district serves approximately 22,000 students across its 36 buildings. Karrie, welcome. I am so happy to have you as a guest.
Thank you so much, Olivia. It's so fun to finally get to meet you. I've heard so many wonderful things and listening to the podcast. I'm such a fan, been such a fan for so long that it's really fun to finally be able to have this conversation in person.
Yes. So I'm going to start by asking for a researcher or some research that will tie into the topic we're talking about. And the reason I reached out to you is you have crafted a spectacular 8-phase coaching cycle with your colleagues. You've facilitated the work, and I am so excited for listeners to learn from you today. What research have you been lingering with or has had your back lately?
Yeah, thanks, Olivia. And just a shout out to our coaching community. This really was thought about and dreamt about from our design team as a comprehensive way to kind of be able to speak to our collective work across our 36 schools, across all grade levels, and really be able to speak to our practice. So it really is because of our work together that this is out and in practice. And as we continue to work on our practice, it's funny because as I was thinking about this question, we spend our days as instructional coaches without our own classrooms, right? We don't have our own students to call our own, but we get to think with all of these teachers and all of these students across our classrooms. And for me, everything comes back to kids and everything comes back to the classroom. So my go-to research is exactly about that. It's about students being engaged for the maximum number of minutes possible within the workshop. And my friend and mentor, Samantha Bennett and Chris Giovanni, really are the gurus of being able to talk about what drives that work, right? Workshop being the number of minutes where 2/3 of the minutes go to kids to be able to do the reading, writing, thinking, and problem solving. And ultimately that they are engaged learners and that we get to do lots of different considerations, especially as we think about emotional engagement, where kids being connected to their teacher, to the content, to each other, and to themselves that really produce student agency and ownership. So I think Chris's book, Why Do I Have to Read This, is just brilliant and really captures the two of those things that we as coaches need to have in mind, because the real possibility and inquiry when it comes into partnering with teachers is that there's no one way. There's no one thing to get every kid, right? We have to think about who they are, about what they need next to grow, and how we design in a way that's going to really meet those needs and maximize their engagement and ownership. So
Karrie, so good. It's so
that's
good.
the best.
It is the best. But then as you're speaking, it's also resonating with me of our coaching work, because it's the exact same darn thing with teachers that we're coaching. There's not one perfect way. Every teacher is different. I'm prepping for coaching cycles coming this week. I get to work with amazing high school teachers. I'm so excited. And, every single one of them are totally different human beings
And it's across different content areas, which I find enthralling. And I'm thinking to myself, it's that bigger conversation we always have to have of how are we grounding our planning, our conversations based on student work, based on evidence of learning, and making sure our planning is so tight with long-term vision. So then our coaching cycles can evolve and be more fluid, right? Um, and so jumping into the EPS coaching cycle, I have the graphic, which I think you may even be so kind and willing to share with listeners. It's gorgeous, it's colorful, it's a one pager. And I think it will be so helpful to listen to this conversation and folks can have it printed out in front of them and take notes. That's what I've done with it as well. So can you first take us through, what is this EPS coaching cycle? And then we'll break it down and zoom in on certain parts that I find really hard as a coach. So I'm hoping you can
Yeah.
help me with that. Absolutely. And I just had the privilege of doing some coaching labs on Friday with our secondary coaches. So it's nice because we just dove into the first part of the cycle, the first half, right, together as a community. So we have some fresh thinking even from Friday to today. So the first thing is, right, just the holistic nature of the coaching cycle is responsive, right? So the thing is that as coaches, right, we are not here to fix anyone. We're not here to impose, right? But really helping people as thinking partners in partnership. My friend Sam calls it like a chiropractic adjustment, right? To align the head, heart, and gut, right? So that then, as a holistic framework, we are protecting dignity of children, dignity of the teacher, centering and inquiry together to be able to think about what it is that we want to maximize in student learning. Now, the problem is, right, sometimes as coaches, is that the things that teachers come to us sometimes with can be very big or very small, right? And so being able to think about how we do this work intentionally and not just haphazardly, right? Like sometimes going to problem solving too soon, right? And in consulting phase rather than in coaching or in consulting stance rather than in coaching stance. So the considerations within the phases of the coaching cycle are really about intentionality and listening carefully to ensure that we are holding that partnership and the teacher's intentions and the students at the center of all of our work, which is why it's in the middle of the coaching cycle. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. And wait, can you read the quote in the middle of the coaching cycle?
Absolutely. So our full goal, right, is to hold partnership and inquiry to maximize student learning.
Yeah,
Our
it's
way of
beautiful.
being as coaches, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's so beautiful. Yes.
So to kind of start off, right, we start with a spark, right? And everything starts with a spark. Sparks can be whether somebody's coming back from a day of learning, whether it's in-house PD, that whole group that you did, whether it's a small group structure like a learning lab or a conference that they went to outside, right? It could be a PLC meeting. There's lots and lots of structures that we have for adult learning. It could also just be an individual teacher coming to a coach. And it could come out, right, as like, I'm really excited to learn about this thing. Or a spark can sometimes come out as frustration. I'm really frustrated about this,
Got
right?
it. Okay. Yeah.
And so tuning ourselves into hearing both of those, right? Whether it's oh my gosh, I can't wait to work on this, or I am so overwhelmed and I have to fix this part, right? In my third period class, for instance, right? Both are equally sparks, right? So we hold those, we're kind of aware of those when we hear them. They're like, oh, that might be a thing. And a spark can happen 2 weeks ago, or it could happen in a hallway conversation as we leave from school today, right?
So
For
we'll have
example,
to document as coaches, though, as these are coming
yes,
up. Okay. Yeah.
exactly. So how do we hold those sparks, right?
Mhm.
Is one of the
Yeah.
questions.
Yes.
And which sparks do you know are going to kind of be let go, right? Like, okay, so we're going to give it a minute, right? Versus like, okay, we need to prioritize this and respond right away, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So that's kind of where we start. And really, that's how do we identify the possible sources that spark inquiry. So thinking and holding those whole group could be an exit ticket from PD this
I
afternoon.
like that idea.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's a spark, right? So how do we hold those whole group, then small group, PLCs, learning labs, other learning structures, and then individual sparks where somebody texts maybe and says, I've really been thinking about this, right? Those are my
Yeah.
favorite texts as a
Me
coach,
too. I love
right?
them. Yeah.
We have those. That's just that's once again holding dignity and inquiry. That's the teacher telling us, oh, right, like this is something
I
I'm thinking.
care about.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
We
Yes.
know what people say and we know what they do, right? So if think about characters and stories, right? That we know characters by what they say and what they do. And the same thing as we are listening attentively to people, we can hold those for them.
Yes. I love it.
So after Spark, then we can come back. It could be tomorrow, it could be 2 weeks and say, hey, I was thinking about that thing that you mentioned, right? To get to question. And the question is where the teacher and coach dig into the spark a little bit deeper, right? To hopefully form an inquiry question. So it goes from either a frustration or excitement into this inquiry question about student learning, right? About our practice in regard to student learning. This could be 5 minutes later, right? This could be a 5-minute conversation, or it could be a longer conversation. So the thing about the coaching cycle is these steps aren't a finite amount of time, right? That they're scalable depending upon the time that we have with teachers. So as we think about our practice, one of the responsive ways that we can be with teachers is, you know what? If we don't have any time, nobody has any time these days, right?
Right.
What could be a quick 5-minute conversation? We don't have to take somebody's whole planning period or something like that. It could be over text messages even, right? Or a series of emails. So as I mentioned, this could be right away, or this might be something we come back to, right? If there's been a big learning event. And the biggest misconception that I want to mention, Olivia, is that question, right, isn't about questioning, right?
Oh, say more.
Question is about listening attentively, paraphrasing to help co-facilitate the thinking of the teacher so that we can form a question together.
Can you give an example?
Yeah. For example, so we were recently working with a teacher and the teacher said, okay, I really want to work on small groups. And this teacher's actually our our coaches are part teaching, part coaching. So this is a coach that was actually in
Wow.
the teacher space, right? And she was like, I really want to work on small groups. And I said, okay, great. What about small groups? And she said, well, I really want to make sure that I am meeting kids' needs, right? I said, okay, so as you think about kids' needs that you want to meet, right? Like who are you thinking about? Who's on your head and heart, right? And then she is able to then articulate, actually, it's not about small groups in terms of the content behaviors as she was thinking about in her unit, but really about the overall learning behaviors, right? And in terms of stamina and engagement that she really wanted to dive into. So she was really thinking down this ELA lens that then really went more of the direction of like, oh, I just want for groups to continue to encourage them to dig in deeper together too. So had I just gone with the first question, right? The first thing that popped into her head about I need to think about some strategy and some routine around reading groups. That wasn't really what was underneath that spark for her, right? That we were able to quickly think about was actually this broader consideration about still getting to know her learners a little bit and helping them believe in themselves a little bit more too.
Beautiful.
And she was going from kind of an individual conference situation that she was doing with each of her kids to like, well, why don't I grab them together and see? And then she immediately texted that night. She was like, worked like a dream. We're good.
Oh, fabulous. Fabulous.
Great. So
Okay.
that's the going from spark into question is really that like listening attentively to what the teacher intends and kind of what's under it.
Perfect. Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense.
So this kind of gets us to like this worthy question to dive into.
Yeah.
And then as we think about that, now it's kind of solidified. So I'm holding that, I'm holding their spark, and I'm holding where the question that they've identified. Now it's time to actually see it together. So the next phase is about reality, right? And so this is really about how we start to build partnership in context to share the same picture.
Yes.
Olivia, we can talk about the classroom all day long, right?
Unless we're in it, it doesn't
Unless
matter.
we're in it together, right? I am not seeing things with your eyes.
Right.
We And so the reality is about being in classroom together to be able to see kids, kid watch together, think about their strengths, their goals, their needs, and their terms of their next steps to grow, so that we can think about where we go next. Right? Is this question still the question? Right? This is a big wondering, right? That a coach has, right? As we walk into the classroom, that teacher could be thinking about small groups, right? And uncovering in the reality together to be able to sit in that is really the necessity.
Yes. Yeah.
I say that we have the privilege to sit at the feet of teachers as instructional coaches, right? And we get to gain that perspective across many classrooms. And for some of us, across an entire system, right? I have the privilege of being in kindergarten classrooms in the morning with the coaches and then in AP physics in the afternoon, right? So we get to see this whole span of learner happen. And while it might be that I work in a 6-8 school, right? I get to see the 6-8 experience for these readers and writers, right? So it's really important for us to sit in reality, because if a teacher shares a spark, right, we start to form a question, we want to ensure that our inquiry sits in the reality of the classroom, right? That it's not ethereal. And that's where we collect information for the teacher, right, to help us finalize and think about our question and our next steps.
Karrie, let me ask you then. It feels like step one, spark. Step two, that idea of the question really happen as a pre or a primer before you jump into a classroom to visit and be in reality with the teacher. And so if I'm trying to map this over time as a coach,
Mhm.
I'm thinking to myself, like, I would definitely have to have a planning meeting of where maybe the spark came over text, but I want to circle back with that teacher and just touch base and do that thought partnership, even if it's 15 minutes, and talk through, right? What is the spark? Let's talk it through. Can I be a thought partner where I'm going underneath the layers? We get the inquiry question, and then we plan for a time that we'll visit and be in the classroom space together to calibrate our reality.
Yes.
Is that in line?
Absolutely, and that can happen very quickly. It could happen over a week, right? So it could be that a teacher I talked to before school, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't know. My reader's workshop, this is unlike any year I've ever had," right? And I could sit before school and like, "Okay, well, what are you wondering about?" Right? We have a quick little conversation where we're moving from that spark into question. And I'll say, "Do you want me to come this afternoon?" Right?
Beautiful. Okay. Yeah.
Immediately right into class, right? So these phases can happen really rapidly in response to the partnership, in response to trust with the teacher, in response to previous work that's been done, or if the teacher is alarmed in any way, right? Like I want to be able to match that as their coach to be able to be responsive to their needs and the needs of kids.
And so when you jump into the classroom space then I'm gonna go with calibrate reality because that's what I feel like. I think in some school districts, the idea of coaching is coach comes in, sits, takes notes, watches a teacher teach, and then offers some feedback. I find that valuable to a degree. I also really love the idea of positioning ourselves as thought partners. And so if the question is grounded in something around student engagement, why wouldn't we both be kid watching together and
Exactly.
even in a Google Doc, like, "This is what I'm seeing and hearing over here. How about you?" So we're not even talking necessarily to interrupt the flow. Maybe the teacher will give some whole class instruction and then we'll break out, or maybe we'll just jump in and have the kids moving throughout the room, working together, right, in that 2/3 time zone. I just I wanna go back to that idea of responsiveness because that's what's critical. There is not one way to coach, and I appreciate that so much with this model. So we're take us now, we're in the classroom, we're trying to establish reality. What does that look and feel like?
So as we're in reality, exactly, kind of getting the vibe of the classroom, right? So like what are kids doing when the teacher's with them? What are the kids doing after the teacher leaves that group and maybe goes to another group, right? We get to be the extra set of eyes and ears, right? For them. If the teacher, I had a teacher that said, I really want to figure out conferring. right? I don't
Don't
know.
we all?
Don't we all? Exactly. It's always conferring, right? Um, and I was like, okay, so, I just don't know, like, my conferences, if I'm really meeting all of their needs, blah, blah, blah. And it's okay. And so I went in, sat on the floor, and just scripted every conversation that she was having with kids, right? That's all. That's what she asked for,
Yes.
right? That is the reality, right? So then, right, we'll come back to plan together with the teacher, but we're not there yet, right? So once we get that vibe, once I gather whatever the teacher for them as their eyes and ears, whatever they're thinking about, what we're thinking about together, right? They have that full transparency, right?
Yes.
No judgment, really rooted in inquiry, right? There's no one way. There's no perfect teacher. There's no perfect life, right? There's no perfect coaching cycle. Then there's 2 steps in the EPS coaching cycle that are green. And they're marked as green because that's where the coach just does some work by themselves, right?
Okay.
Outside
Yeah.
of the partnership. So much like a class, right? Planning for a classroom, right? There is so much that we can possibly dig into together with students. And if we just came out and said, okay, kids, what do you think today? Math, right? It would be completely
Too
overwhelming,
much. Right.
right?
Right. Yeah.
It's too big. So much in the same vein, right, as coaches, not coming in with some thoughtful intention, knowing where people are, what they have valued, what they've told us, what kids have done, right? To make some intentional time to refine
Sure.
that question is on us, right? That's on us for planners as coaches. So refine is really how do we consolidate the spark, the question and reality, and refine that question for our trialing. So, for instance, the teacher that was saying, I really want to work on conferring, right? Go in, write down all of her conferences. She's a masterful conferrer, right? Just beautiful, honoring kids, listening, paraphrasing, getting some next steps. Kids weave with their next step on a sticky note and everything else, right? And I sit there and thinking about, okay, so how do we want to what work, right, do we want to do? Does this teacher want to do about conferring? First of all, I need to understand because what I saw when I was in class in reality, right, was this beautiful conference structure that she had. So I don't understand. That's my first thinking. Well, I don't see what you're seeing.
Okay.
And if I can't see what you're seeing, then our coaching cycle is going to be around consultation, right? And you're not going to be getting what you are thinking you're going to get in our partnership together.
Yeah.
So I want to ensure that first, right? We also get to think about where we plan in a refine, right? This is about creating a coaching conversation, right?
Yes.
And so just like the workshop model, where 2/3 of the minutes go to kids, right? Really refining an intention, right? Is where we get to, the workshop model keeps us honest too, in terms of 2/3 of the conversation being the
Goes to
teacher.
them.
Yes.
Yeah.
So in the same way, and I draw a circle, right? And plan out the coaching conversation where I really want to think about, okay, so what did they say, right? Where do I really need to listen in carefully, right? In order to make sure that I'm holding their question and their spark, as well as what we saw from kids together. What do we want to look at together in that plan time, right? What's going to be fueling our conversation and our inquiry so that we can think about what we want to do for kids. What do we want to see kids do? What do we want to hear kids say as a result of our work? So sitting within refine, kind of going back and being like, okay, I think our question is like on the right track, right? Really planning out that coaching conversation. What do we want to look at? Do we want to pull in some student work? Do we want to look at the data that I collected during reality in the classroom together? Do we need to look at something else? Do we need to go and talk to some kids and get their perspective?
More. Yeah.
Think about empathy interviews, right? And their experience in school as well, right? So I might do some of that, right? As I think about refine, if I'm like, I wonder if kids feel heard in a conference, right?
Yeah.
Like that might be interesting for us to be able to come back to and think about. Maybe I'll go ask a couple kids so that we have that for our planning session too. So this step is really about being prepared for the conversation that then we have with the teacher so we can maximize their minutes and not overtake their agency and ownership and try to kind of fix it quickly.
So I also want to point out, as you said, teachers do not have enough time in the day to reflect on their practice. It feels, when I'm in a school, it feels like the day starts and then it's done and it's just gone in a really lovely way because it's often amazing work happening. And it's like, I have no idea where those minutes went. So if a teacher has a 40-minute prep period, what I hear you saying is, you're not taking every minute of that 40 minutes. It's planning for perhaps knowing that person. Maybe they want to chat for 15 minutes. And so you're going to take that 15-minute chunk and you're going to say, what 10 minutes am I going to give them to look at student work, to read, write, think, talk? And then what 5 minutes am I going to sprinkle in to facilitate that conversation as their coach and help us get to a point of the next coaching cycle or the next week? Is that on point with what
Exactly.
you're thinking? Okay.
Yes, 100%. And really the heart of this, right, is to not come in, right? Like if we think about a conversation that we just happen into, right? I might ask questions that might be dignity violations to the teacher too, right? That I might, because I just haven't thought about it, right? On this refined stage could be a 5 minute, right? Like it's just having the intention of thinking about like who is in front of me, right? What are we thinking about together? And how can we maximize our conversation and be able to meet the teacher's needs, kids' needs, and fuel our partnership forward?
Yeah, absolutely. And so do you send the refine after you've taken a moment? What is your next step?
Then we get to plan with the teacher.
Ah, okay.
So that might be the time where I send a coaching note. Might be the Google Doc with just the raw data, right? Like, hey, here's what I collected today. Can't wait to talk after school, right? And then I'll have, right, like our plan. This might be where I generate some, other questions or like, hey, was thinking about these three, right? Like maybe I'm not meeting with them for a couple of days, right? These three things were rolling in my head as I was thinking about our initial question. Which one resonates with you, right? If I need to get some more information from the teacher,
The
right,
perfect time. Yeah.
then this is the perfect time before then we plan together.
Awesome. All right. So we're at step 5, that planning time, and
Mhm.
it's designated in however much the teacher needs to move forward. And then what is trial?
So in plan, we really want to also think about like how we're like what our question is, what we're going to try with kids, and then how we're going to be together in the classroom,
I love it.
right?
Yeah.
So then in trial, then it's enacting that plan, right? So this is where we're really holding. So this is a very important part of this question is how do we both hold the inquiry, right? As we enact in the classroom.
That's
It's not
so
just the
good.
teacher that's holding the inquiry.
So good. Yeah.
We have to own it just as much, right? It's what makes us very different from evaluators, right? We are in it together, right? Every step of the way. And so what does that look like in the classroom? Are we co kid watching, right? Or both kind of holding that inquiry and that monitoring for the student learning behaviors? Are we maybe doing a little bit of co-teaching, right? And some tandem teaching together? Are there maybe some kids that are specifically we're like, okay, these are the kids that we really want to center in our work, and I'm just gonna be kid watching those 4 students, right?
Okay.
And our work together. So really that trialing is what we can often overlook, right? In our coaching cycle, right? Where it's just like, okay, I'll be back into class rather than being back into class together with intention to hold that inquiry together.
Well, and that's where the circle can come right back into play, right? So as coaches, we're planning our conversations. So it's honoring the teacher's time, but then we have to plan the trial in the same way, or the
Right.
class experience, whatever it is going to be. Where, here's where I'm like, it's actually labeled. Here's where Carrie or Livy are going to do this, and here's where the classroom teacher is going to do this. So I think being that explicit, it helps us have the classroom time flow and we get the most out of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than it feeling maybe that it's for you, right? Like that right, like it's for somebody else,
Right,
right?
right.
But that it's
Yeah.
really about us trying to figure this out for kids because like we said, there's no one way, right? So it's really just about our intentionality together.
Yeah. Beautiful, beautiful. So then capture and intention are the last two. So talk to us about capture.
So capture, you'll notice is also green, right? Which means this is the coach's responsibility, right? So this is really about documentation. So when we are in the classroom trialing together, how do I document our learning that's going to continue to fuel our continued practice, right? So I'd like to say this can be words, pictures, right? Like any ways that we can really capture, right? What we what we tried, right? How that went, right? And how kids responded.
Yes. Yeah.
And then possibly fuel for what we need to do next, right? So that capturing is really an important component, whether that happens in a coaching note, in a letter, in pictures, maybe videos with kids, right? Like we are privileged enough to be there as an extra set of eyes and ears. So how is that privilege going to result in teachers seeing something that they normally wouldn't be able to do by themselves,
Yes, yes,
right?
and I think the idea of transfer into their practice. So, I it's so funny, I was just, I had the privilege of interviewing Matt Renwick, and we were talking about print versus digital notebooks to capture, and, I was saying that I love OneNote, and I've used it for years since I began coaching, gosh, the early 2000s in New York City. It's been a while, but I appreciate that you can draw in OneNote, you can put a voice recording, you can type whatever it is, and then capture. I also know teachers that they look at it and they just close. It's way too much. And
Mhm.
so it's going back again to being responsive. Just because a note-taking system works for us as coaches does not mean it actually works for teachers. So I think it's critical during that capture phase, we ask every single adult we're working with, what is going to impact you? And I can capture in a way that you will actually want to transfer this into your
Absolutely.
practice, right?
Well, and noticing working at K-12, right? So my elementary friends, right? Um, we oftentimes don't take computers into the classroom, right? It's paper and pencil, right? In those spaces because everything just feels a little bit more intimate. Um, I have another coach that really has done brilliant work around Reggio Emilia documentation boards, right? And so she documents not only the teacher's learning, right? But also helps partner with the teacher to help document the kids' learning through their inquiry question. So, how we can share that learning and inquiry with children as we're thinking about our own practice for them, right? How do we help capture that as well with the teacher is a really fun layer to add on to.
Those are great ideas. All right. So
So
take
fun.
us to intention.
So this is where we solidify, right? So we've gone through this learning together, right? How do we solidify our future intentions, right? Based upon our inquiry, right? So what did we learn? What did kids do and say? And then how do we ensure that we continue and transfer that into our practice as we move forward, right? So what supports do we need? What ongoing coaching supports do we need? Whether it's, just that, do we need to have a check-in, right? Kind of a thing. Or do we have more deep work to do? And round the coaching cycle we could go, right? Or it's really that transfer.
And that's a separate meeting after the trial.
Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so then if I'm looking at the 8 phases, it feels like there's the planning, based on spark or conversation, and then, you move into reality. So there's a classroom visit, there's time in classroom. There refine, which is that moment the coach owns, moving into then another plan based on that reality calibration, um, zipping to then another classroom experience that's now really thought through, and then captures happening during that second visit, and then intention is set in another planning session. What I appreciate with this is, I heard you even say, there may be days in between each of these, and so the idea of the fluidity and the flow of this cycle, I
Karrie, I can't tell you, I am so stinking excited to give this a go with teachers this week and then circle back with you, because I feel like it's fresh, and that's what I appreciate about it. And I also know, we have to wrap our conversation. I also know, though, in that reality, moving to refine. The reality sometimes is a hard conversation. So it may be, yes, someone wanted to look at conferring and they're knocking it out of the park. But it may also be that there are some emotional challenges going on in the classroom or just engagement overall. And so I think that idea of refine is to sit without judgment and also to help every single teacher's practice grow in service of children. So that refine can be a hard conversation of calibrating reality. And then it's circling back to there's no judgment. Let's try this together. And I also appreciate the messiness of this, the goodness, the good messiness.
Mhm.
Um, that coaching isn't about that perfect moment, that perfect cycle. It's about, getting smarter together for kids. So, and hopefully that vulnerability is prompted for, right, from the very start with the spark, right?
Yeah.
That's the whole point is we're not coming in with the spark and saying, oh, you need to do this,
No.
right? But from the very beginning, the teacher really is the one who is owning that, sharing that. And so there's some vulnerability in the fact that they will even start to say, oh my gosh, this is really bothering me, or this is really going well. And I want to build on it together. I love it. So let's end our conversation. Who is an educator that is inspiring you or has inspired you as of late? Well, so if I have to go back to our time here in Evergreen. We were really unbelievably lucky to spend a good amount of time with Chris Giovanni.
Yeah.
Here and do a lot of learning labs and time together in classrooms. So she continues to be an inspiration, not just for me, but people here in Evergreen, right? Where they'll say, oh my gosh, I can't believe that we got to sit at the feet, right? Of Chris Giovanni. And that then ripples through all of our practice, right? Where we're like, oh yeah, remember that thing that as a spark in and of itself,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Can years later, right? This was pre-pandemic, right? Years later, still inspire us to be able to do big things for kids. So just a shout out to Chris and Sam and all of their hard work that continues to reverberate here in Evergreen as well, for me personally and for a lot of educators. Yeah. Well, and this work now is having a ripple effect across the world because the work is being shared. And that's what this is about. So, Karrie, thank you so much for taking the time to have this conversation. Thank you, Olivia. It's been so fun. Yes, it has. Take care, friend. All right. Bye.
Solutions Coaching and Teaching Strategies is created, produced, and edited by me, Olivia Wall. Thank you to my older son, Benjamin, who created the music that's playing in the background. You can follow and listen to Solutions wherever you get your podcasts, or subscribe to never miss an episode and watch on YouTube. Thank you to my guest, Karrie Fansler, for sharing how her school district's innovative 8-phase coaching cycle transforms traditional coaching cycles into dynamic partnerships that focus on maximizing student learning. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Send me an email at solutionspodcast@gmail.com. Let me know how you and your community nurture partnerships that focus on maximizing student learning. How do your coaching cycles flow? How are you responsive to your students' and colleagues' needs? Tune in every Monday for best research-backed coaching and teaching strategies that you can apply right away to better the lives of the children in your care. Stay tuned now for my bonus episode every Friday, where I'll share how I applied what I learned from the guest in schools that week. See you then.